there's one thing that I see come up, and whether it's communism or Marxism or this neo-Marxism, it's all about deciding, I think, who deserves what. And the word deserve is a very interesting word to me. We've thrown it back over the years. We've had this discussion because as we would make money on the internet, and sometimes large amounts of money, and someone would accidentally flash their PayPal account, and people would say, "Oh, this guy that I thought was, just my buddy and my equal has like $120,000 sitting around. Now I don't feel so good about him." And it would be like,
yeah.
But sir, who decides who deserves what? I don't know.
You're right about that, man. We need to have a serious discussion about money, because the issue isn't how much money you have. That's irrelevant. The issue is what you choose to do with it. And once we know already, the psychological literature is pretty clear, is that once you hit a kind of lower end middle class existence, extra money doesn't do anything to make you happier. So there's the pain of poverty. But once you're out of poverty, which basically means the bill collectors aren't chasing you around and you're not exactly living hand to mouth, then additional money doesn't do much for your psychological well-being. So extra money isn't making you happier. But for me, and I think for many people who have their heads screwed on straight about money, it's a tool for accomplishing things. And so, I'm trying to put the money to good use. I started this biblical lecture series and rented the theater with some of the Patreon funds. I mean, that's paid for itself because of all the tickets that were sold, but I had no idea. I mean, who the hell is going to, what kind of business plan is that? Is it going to rent a theater, do a lecture on the biblical series? Hey, man, people are going to be lined up for blocks to go to that.
I've been holding on to this. I've been holding this question since the start. You mentioned a lecture series. You were talking about personal responsibility, right? My listeners have heard me talk about Obamacare and personal responsibility for some time now, and I'll lay it out, and I want your opinion on it. Prior to Obamacare, there was no mandate that people carried health insurance. So what people did, mostly poor people and healthy people, like 25-year-old guys, didn't carry insurance. And then when that 25-year-old guy breaks his arm in a skiing accident or whatever it is that they're doing, they go to the hospital. They're in dire straits, they fix it, and they don't pay their bill, right? So now that there's an insurance mandate, it forces people to be responsible, in my head. I feel like if Obama had pitched it that way, as he was selling it to America, like this isn't some slacker giveaway. This is a bill enforcing personal responsibility, just like we do with driving, for example. And that way, when I go to the hospital with no insurance, I'm not leaning on you three to pay my bill for me or to pay double so that you can pay your bill for people like me. What do you think of that argument? How do you feel about an insurance mandate?
Well, I'm temperamentally opposed to such things, I would say. Although I'm not claiming for a minute that you're not making a good case. And I would also say the healthcare issue is incredibly complex, because, well, we have a single payer system in Canada, and it actually works not too bad. Like I lived in the States for a while, and I got to say, I think and this might be true of the States in general compared to Canada, at the high end, nothing beats the care you can get in the U.S. But in the median and at the low end, Canada's healthcare system works pretty good, and it has some perverse effects from a what would you say, right-wing perspective. So one of them is, for example, that the rate of entrepreneurship in Canada is actually higher in the U.S. than in the U.S. per capita, and the reason for that seems to be that Canadians can take risks when they're young, like starting a new business or changing jobs, for example, and they never have to worry about losing their health care. And so that's kind of cool. The mandate, I mean, we kind of have a mandate like that in Canada because you have to pay your taxes, right? And you could say, well, that's not really that much different than being mandated to purchase insurance. And so, maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth at the same time, but it does seem to me that there's something wrong with forcing people to buy insurance. However, we do it for automobiles.
Yeah, you mentioned the entrepreneurial thing, and I didn't bring it up because I'm a small sample size, but that happened to me. You don't know me, but I have a special needs son, and I wouldn't have been able to leave the paternalistic cover that my Fortune 500 job gave me and start my own businesses if Obamacare didn't force insurance companies to take children. right? When you get a children on your plan, it doesn't matter if that kid has, autism, Down syndrome, or a heart condition or whatever. The insurance company will cover that kid. Children get covered. That's an Obamacare thing. Yep. And if my businesses did pretty well. It was a good thing for the country to enable entrepreneurs to do their thing. And there's an argument to be made that not locking people into their day jobs is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would approach this sort of question often more from a scientific perspective, which is, well, let's make a minor change and then evaluate and see what happens. Because lots of weird things happen. Like it's not obvious that when you put in a social safety net like single-payer healthcare, that the rate of entrepreneurial activity would go up. No one would hypothesize that, right? It's an observed consequence. And I think with these complex systems, especially healthcare, because it's such a morass, you have to make small adjustments and check and see what happens. And I don't think you can rely on ideological solutions to solve the problem. I think the free market is a good solution to most things because it distributes decision making. That's the fundamental issue. And it enables computations to be made about such things as comparative value that would be impossible for any organization to make. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a free market solution for every problem. And healthcare seems to be, well, because it's so closely tied in with death, let's say, which seems to not play by the rules. It's not easy to encapsulate that within a single philosophy, perhaps.
I didn't think we'd line up on this. I thought we were going to debate. One of the arguments that my listeners have heard before is syphilis, right? Syphilis is a disease. It'll eventually it'll make you go crazy, and then you die, right? It's a painful death that involves going psycho and then of course expiring. The cure for syphilis is a 50-cent penicillin pill, right? That's how you cure it. But somebody with it will pay everything. They'll mortgage their house. They'll sell their house. They'll go into poverty, right? If I'm a drug company and I have an EpiPen, I can raise that price to anything I want. Right?
Because only if you're the only provider of the EpiPen.
You're right. But then you get into the whole, you have to issue patents because otherwise there's no incentive for people to break new ground. And it's complicated. But I would argue I really only have two examples where I don't like capitalism. I'm a pretty big fan of capitalism. Now, one is healthcare. Because like you said, death doesn't really follow the normal rules of supply and demand. You get desperate people making desperate decisions. And the other one is security. I feel like if whatever, your subdivision looks for the cheapest security, then you might not get what you're looking for. I feel like policing is a good government task.
Do you know what? When I think about the healthcare thing and the money that gets paid into it, the biggest thing that bothers me about being mandated is that I know where the money that I'm paying in is going. It's going to people much older and in much more need than I am. And while that's a very altruistic thing to have, I suppose you could take that mindset. I tend to take the mindset that I kind of wish that there was an age group that was 25 to 35, and all of us guys who were within there were paying into one pot. And that was our pot of money. And that money was not just sitting on a shelf somewhere, but accruing interest or maybe in the market. Maybe you get to decide where your money sits. And when you need that money can pull out, and you can have like an insurance saving account that was in a way government mandated. I don't know if that's a crazy idea, but it would make me feel so much better than just paying money in and just seeing it go away.
Well, just so you know, that's definitely a thing. It's HSA. It's called a health savings account. And you put into it tax deferred, just like or maybe tax free, just like a retirement account. And then that can grow and grow and grow. And maybe you put in so much and you're so healthy through your 20s that you're just funded. And I
feel like those should be mandated. Like I feel like that is such a better answer than what we currently have. Because the big complaint you'll hear from the far right is like, and they'll use some dirty language. There's they don't want to pay for those people's health care.
I don't mind the way they do it. It's a choice, and I like choice. And it's, you can do an HSA if that's your thing. You could do insurance if that's your thing. Because there's a risk period there, right? Maybe you start contributing to your health savings account when you're 22. You get hurt when you're 25, and there's only $6,000 in there. That hardly handles an ingrown toenail in the ER, right?
For many men in that age, I feel like it's against our very genetic code to do that. They're saying, whoa, slow down with all that adventuring and entrepreneuring. Let's get a safety net under you first. And that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're like, no, I want to swing on two vines and then jump down on that beast because I know I can kill it with one whack and the whole village is going to eat because that's what's in my genes. But it's modern days. So you got to take a step back, get that safety net under you.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people in their 20s and stuff say, "Hey, I'm healthy. Why am I paying for this insurance?" And it's like, you're healthy now, right? You know, when I was in my 20s, I had, you know, broke a foot playing ice hockey, and that had to be handled. That's when I tore or maybe I was in my early 30s when I tore my ACL. You know, I had all these athletic-related injuries as I did this sort of thing. I went through some period I had to see doctors because I couldn't turn my neck. You could have known me for 2 years, and I'd only do this.
Your hand,
yeah,
man.
broke my hand. I was
in your hand.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, I had to get that fixed. I think it was, you know, whatever, mid-30s for that. And everybody, you know, is really healthy until they're not, and you know, that's why.
This whole healthcare discussion, it's really interesting because it parlays into something else that I wanted to talk to Dr. Peterson about.